Hi, what's happening? Y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and we have a lot to talk about today, especially everything going down with this Eric Bieniemy situation. Apparently, the Commanders absolutely love him. He's their top guy. Apparently, with all of the coaching vacancies that got filled around the NFL recently as well, we may be his top candidate. I mean, apparently we brought him in to have dinner Wednesday night, and then now he's going in for an interview today as in Thursday. I would honestly be a little surprised if he left without contract to pen. Like, this video may look crazy within just a couple of hours because it may come out very soon, any moment now, maybe even while I'm editing this video, that the Commanders have officially hired Eric Bieniemy as their next offensive coordinator. And I want to dive into this whole situation. I've already talked about Eric Bieniemy a lot, but I also want to dive into, from some sources, what I'm hearing about how much play calling he actually contributed to the Chiefs season and specifically the Super Bowl as well. I want to talk about how good Eric Bieniemy could be for us, and then also how much of a risk this is for Ron Rivera with his situation, and could he be potentially hiring his replacement? So there's a lot to talk about with the situation, that even though I've already talked about Eric Bieniemy quite a bit, there's still some new angles we got to take a look at. And again, there are some sources that fully break down how much Eric Bieniemy contributed to the Chiefs' success, and also Rivera reveals why he wants Eric Bieniemy so much, him personally. So before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately, and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up. Not this upcoming Sunday, but every Sunday after that, we will have the call-in live show where y'all can call in and voice your opinions on everything going on, potentially Eric Bieniemy being our new offensive coordinator. Y'all already know, as a Georgia fan, I'm sad to see Todd Monken go to the Ravens. We can talk about everything, so make sure you pull up on Sundays for that as well. And then also be on the lookout for all of the content that's coming out. I know I've missed a few days, but I'm about to be back at it, so stay tuned for all of the constant content. And without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so first of all, Jordan Schultz tweeted out, my understanding, Ron Rivera and the Commanders have high hopes that Eric Bieniemy is their guy. League source told me yesterday they've had dinner with him Wednesday, and they plan to get EB into the facility today for an interview. And then Ron Rivera highlighted the fact that he loves Eric Bieniemy because of his ability to cultivate relationships with players. For example, Pat Mahomes, and the fact that that was invaluable. And he does get a lot of credit for that. Even when people don't necessarily talk about his play calling, they say at the very least, the one thing you can't take away from him is that he was basically the middle between Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid, being able to relay that communication so that those guys can mesh as well as possible. He would take in Andy Reid's opinions, Pat Mahomes' feelings, and then make it work. He was the mediator, he was the middleman, everything like that. And so that's one of the things that Rivera absolutely loves about him, that the players absolutely love him. His ability to get the most out of players and cultivate great relationships with those guys is one of the reasons, even without the play calling, Rivera still loves him. But again, we're going to dive into a little bit later of how much of an impact he had on the play calling. But yeah, man, Chiefs offensive coordinator met with the Commanders last night for dinner. And I'm not going to lie, this kind of feels like the whole Josh Norman thing all over again. The Deshaun Jackson with Pierre Garcon. This feels like the same thing. So that makes me even feel like it's even more likely that we're going to end up signing him as our offensive coordinator or hiring him as an offensive coordinator. I mean, we're taking him out to dinner and things like that. That's not usual for meetings, for trying to hire a guy. I don't believe we took anybody else to dinner, and we took him out to dinner, and that wasn't even an interview. We took him out to dinner Wednesday, and the interview is today. So it's two separate situations where Rivera and probably Martin Mayhew and maybe some other guys have met with Eric Bieniemy in person. And like, why take him to dinner in the first place? So you could tell that this is a huge priority for the Commanders. Now, nothing's official. The Commanders clearly love him. I mean, we saw that with the fact that they refused to announce who their next offensive coordinator would be until they interviewed Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy is the last and final interview out of what I believe like 8 interviews. And then Greg Roman was another recent one that happened a couple of days ago, but they were not hiring anybody. They weren't making any decisions until Eric Bieniemy was interviewed. And again, not only was he interviewed, they took him out to dinner the night before. So that's super random. And it's been reported that the belief is Washington wants to wrap this up soon. He's an exceptionally strong candidate for the position. And then, of course, we're really just waiting on to see if Eric Bieniemy wants to be the offensive coordinator for the Commanders. The Commanders have done everything on their end to show that they love him. They want him to be the next guy. But Does Eric Bieniemy want to be the Commanders offensive coordinator? That's where things get interesting. That's literally the only reason he hasn't been hired yet. But I really appreciate Ron Rivera. First of all, he went out there and said that he basically doesn't want to sit there and do what's safe. And again, that's been my biggest pet peeve with the Commanders, even going back before Ron Rivera, but especially since Ron Rivera has been here, that we play it safe in the draft, in free agency, in every decision that we make, even throughout games. Up big against the Houston Texans, instead of running up the score, he wants to do this, run the ball, run the clock out, get out safely with a small lead, and all that matters is a win type of thing. Now, at the end of the day, all that matters is a win, but just that philosophy of not trying to gamble in any way, playing it safe every way possible, that's the reason we keep winning 7-8 games a season. And so I like the fact that he officially said with this Eric Bieniemy situation that he's putting his foot down and he's finally not doing what's safe. He's not playing it safe. He's going for the big home run hit. He's going for the risky move. High ceiling, low floor, boom or bust. Eric Bieniemy could end up being one of those great young minds that a lot of people hopes he is, but he could also very much just as likely be a complete dud, and we could end up seeing why other teams don't want to hire him as a head coach or give him other opportunities elsewhere, and why he kept ending up back on the Chiefs and things like that. But then even the Chiefs only gave him a 1-year deal this past season, so you could tell that they pretty much was just like, we're gonna do you a favor, we want you to go elsewhere, we're ready to move on, but we like you, Andy Reid's a nice guy and everything, so we're gonna keep you and give you another year to go out there and show what you can do for us, for the Chiefs, and for the entire NFL really, and show everybody what you can do. And then after that, you really gotta go. So now that they won the Super Bowl, Eric Bieniemy's pretty much good and gone. And again, with all of the head coaching spots getting filled everywhere, at this point the only available spots are offensive coordinators, and of course you have like the Texans and things like that may be a good situation, but overall we may have the best thing left for him. And again, with Rivera not being necessarily safe with a new owner coming in, I mean, new owners were already talking to Sean Payton about him potentially being the head coach when they buy the team. So Rivera is clearly not even necessarily wanted by the next potential owners for the Commanders. So he's super on the hot seat. And so Eric Bieniemy, for him, the Commanders could be the best situation for him to become a head coach the soonest possible. Go be the offensive coordinator here for 1 year. New owner comes in, for some reason doesn't like Rivera for many reasons potentially, and fires Ron Rivera, and now you're first in line to be the head coach for the Commanders moving forward, or whatever the new name may end up being if the new owner changes the name or whatever. But again, speaking to that, that's really interesting that Rivera is potentially hiring his replacement. I mean, that takes a lot of putting your ego to the side and doing what's best for the team. And who knows, maybe if Eric Bieniemy goes out there, we hire him, and he turns this offense into like one of the best offenses in the NFL, gets the most out of Sam Howell, gets the most out of this receiving core and these skill position players, the running backs and things like that. Our offense is looking like one of the best in the NFL. Maybe that's enough for the new owner to be like, Rivera, hey, you're the one that hired this guy. I trust you to continue doing things for this team as the head coach. So maybe Eric Bieniemy could end up saving Ron Rivera's job. Again, it's one of those risky things, boom or bust. Eric Bieniemy could potentially be great enough to replace Ron Rivera, or he could be great enough, and depends on how the new owner looks at it, to actually save Ron Rivera's job. It can go either way. Or Eric Bieniemy could end up just being terrible and Ron Rivera getting fired right along with him. So again, shouts out to Ron Rivera for putting this ego to the side, because that's really interesting there, man. And then also, Albert Breer was asked if Eric Bieniemy's hire could come in with input from new ownership, and basically the answer was no. The Commanders aren't that far down the line on the sale. So Albert Breer basically said that he can't see where a potential ownership group would be that deep into the weeds of the football operation. Shouts out to Scott Jennings for the tweet. So basically, long story short, the new ownership, potentially who it could ever be, Josh Harris, who's probably in the lead for it right now, the owner of the Philadelphia 76ers and the Devils, even if he is the guy that's potentially the closest to buying the Commanders from Dan Snyder, he has no input on this Eric Bieniemy situation, which I think is pretty interesting. And then of course, this whole situation is weird just because, I mean, like I talked about briefly earlier, the fact that Eric Bieniemy still has refused to get a head coaching job is interesting, and Ryan Clark brings up a good point. The Eagles lost both of their coordinators after losing the Super Bowl, yet Raheem Morris and Eric Bieniemy didn't land head coaching jobs after a win. If showing up in the biggest moment is part of the criteria, Morris and Bieniemy did that. So my question is, what now make it make sense? And there's points to both sides. I definitely see what Ryan Clark is saying. I definitely agree with a lot of it. But at the same time, even me, I wanted Shane Steichen as our next offensive coordinator, head coach, if we could have got him. I loved what he did developing Justin Herbert and turning Jalen Hurts into what he is right now, because I wasn't a Jalen Hurts fan with him coming out of Oklahoma, coming out of Alabama, and even his first year with the Eagles and things like that, and some people were impressed with what he did. I wasn't that impressed. I still saw a lot of flaws in his game, but Shane Steichen turned that man into a potential MVP candidate, and he played the best game I've ever seen him play in that Super Bowl. That looked like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL in that Super Bowl against the Chiefs. It really did. And Shane Steichen gets a lot of the credit for that. Brian Johnson, the QB's coach, may get some of that. Nick Sirianni, as the head coach, may get some of that. But Shane Steichen is the one that usually gets the most of the credit for that. So I can see why Shane Steichen would be sought out more than like an Eric Bieniemy. But I'm still really high on both of them, and I would be happy to have both of them, either one. Now, Mark Bullock, make sure y'all follow him on Twitter. You subscribe to his Substack. He did an entire film breakdown on this whole Eric Bieniemy situation and what it would look like with the Commanders offense if he would have become our offensive coordinators, how he would use Sam Howell, how he would use Terry McLaurin and all of our best pieces, blocking schemes, everything. And he literally has the film and the plays to show it. Literal example plays that the Chiefs ran that we could run with certain guys on our team and things like that. And with the personnel that we currently have and may end up acquiring in the draft. So make sure you go check that out. But at the end of it, he did a complete summary. He said the risk with Bieniemy is significant because only those inside the Chiefs organization know exactly how much of the success of this offense is down to him and how much is on Mahomes and Reed. It could easily blow up in their face and lead to everyone being fired by the new owner this time next year. However, Ron Rivera will likely know that's a strong possibility either way, and the upside of that risk is that Bieniemy can at least replicate the structure that is in place with the Chiefs, leading to the best chance of success for the offense. It's a high risk, high reward scenario, but in a year that a new owner will likely clean house unless the team is extremely successful, it might be a risk Rivera is willing to take, and I completely agree with all of that. Oh wow, and interesting news just tweeted out by Ian Rappaport. Wide receivers coach from the Commanders Drew Terrell has been requested by the Arizona Cardinals for their offensive coordinator job. Wow, I didn't know he was that highly touted at all. I didn't know he was being sought after like that. Our wide receivers coach is going to potentially become an offensive coordinator for the Cardinals. That's huge. That's a big promotion. Do we have another Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan on the roster and we just didn't know? Maybe the Arizona Cardinals see something that we don't see, but that's really interesting. But going back to my point, like I said earlier, at Honest Football on Twitter tweeted out his personal take on Bieniemy's play calling and how much he had to deal with it and all of that type of stuff. He said what he does would be more valuable to me as a GM than someone else who calls plays themselves. He's the conduit between Reed and Mahomes. Basically, like Rivera said, what I was talking about earlier in the video. Literally everything goes through him. He is the funnel. Play calling is in his bones. Every single one of those drives Mahomes put together this year, they were soft scripted by Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid together. He gives Andy the charting info between drives. He sets it up. They go through everything together so that anyone could call it, just like every good staff does. You can ask any offensive coordinator who's worked with Andy how they've learned the finer points to call in plays, and every single one of them will say it came from Andy allowing them to relay the calls like he did for Holmgren. It's the greatest masterclass possible in offensive football. So that's a good point. Even if Eric Bieniemy isn't literally the one calling the plays into the mic, what he does for the Chiefs is undeniable. And there's a certain floor to that I don't think he's as boom or bust as some people feel like, especially the bust side. I feel like he's going to come with a certain level of talent for play calling that I think is pretty underrated. And shouts out to @HonestNFL because I feel like that's a great breakdown of how he's contributed to the Chiefs in the best way and why they're going to miss him when he leaves and why we should be happy to have him. Again, Thomas Brown has always been my favorite candidate, but I've also really liked Eric Bieniemy as well, and that's one of the main reasons why. And again, like I spoke on earlier, that's one of the main reasons why Rivera loves him. He basically could be the perfect middleman for Rivera to Sam Howell. He can speak both of their languages and translate it for them and find the happy middle for both guys' opinions and things like that. And even if it's not Sam Howell, if it's another quarterback in the future or whatever, or another head coach, Eric Bieniemy is really good at that type of thing at the very least. And of course, like I said earlier, the Commanders also interviewed Ravens offensive coordinator Greg Roman this week, but I think they were just more so doing a due diligence there. Maybe he's the backup if Eric Bieniemy doesn't end up becoming our offensive coordinator, but it's obvious that Eric Bieniemy is the Commanders' favorite, and I would be quite shocked if we leave today and he is not our offensive coordinator. And just to run a little bit of history, shouts out to NFL Trade Rumors for this. Bieniemy, 53, played 10 seasons in the NFL for the Chargers, Bengals, and Eagles before retiring in 1999. His NFL coaching career began in 2006 when he took over as the Vikings running backs coach. Then the Chiefs hired him for the same position in 2013, and he was later promoted to offensive coordinator in 2018. And then the Kansas City Chiefs signed Bieniemy to an extension in 2021, and then that's where he's been ever since. So just a quick history lesson on Eric Bieniemy, because I don't feel like I've ever actually done that for him in any of these videos. I've talked about him in the many videos I've talked about him. So that's just a quick brief history right there. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Let me know how you feel about Eric Bieniemy. First of all, do you want him as the offensive coordinator? And also, if you do, if you don't, either way, how do you feel about the likeliness of this happening? Do you feel like it's very likely that he ends up being our offensive coordinator before the night's even over? Do you feel like if a week goes by and we don't hear anything, he's pretty much as good as gone and we may end up hiring somebody else as an offensive coordinator? And if we don't end up hiring Eric Bieniemy, who do you prefer? Pat Shurmur, Ken Zampese, London from the Falcons is already taken. Do you prefer like a Thomas Brown, potentially Sean McVay's next prodigy? Do you prefer Greg Roman? Again, we talked to like 8 guys. Who do you prefer if it's not Eric Bieniemy? And then also, Nikki Javala just tweeted 8 minutes ago, Eric Bieniemy's interview with the Commanders is still going per source. He had dinner with Rivera and company last night and has been meeting with them all day today. He's still at the facility. So that's really interesting, man. That was at 5:06 p.m. and apparently they've been interviewing him for a while already. So they may be talking money at this point. And I think it's very likely that he gets signed. But again, let me know in the comment section how you feel about this entire video. And of course, I appreciate all of my support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose names you see scrolling on the screen right now. I really appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.